Hi everyone, I have a fun watercolored Christmas card to share with you today. We are going to use the holiday cheese stamp set from Waffle Flower Crafts, and we are going to make this beautiful. It almost looks like a still life scene with these different little holiday cheeses piled up and then a little mug of hot cocoa in the background. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to take the main stamp from the holiday cheese stamp set. It's a bunch of cheeses, and then there's also some winter foliage, some winter berries as well. And I'm going to stamp that with antique linen distress ink. And this is the stamp set, just in case you're wondering what other stamps come with it. And I am using Arches cold press paper. Now I cut out this card panel using the deckled frames die from Waffle Flower Crafts. That gives you that really great look of like sort of torn edges. I just think that for this design in particular, because it kind of looks like a still life, just having sort of these raggedy edges will just be really, really pretty with when combined with the rest of the design, especially the background that's going to kind of fade out into an uneven pattern, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. So I have masked my cheese with some Simon Says Stamp masking tape, and then I did stamp that hot cocoa behind it. Now I've removed the masking paper, so we're not using any masking paper while we lay our background down. The trick that I'm using is I'm laying clear water down, but only in the areas where I want the background color to appear. So I'm being very careful not to touch any of those cheeses or the water glass. And I'm going to lay in my darkest color right next to the images. Now this is indigo, and it's a pretty concentrated solution of indigo, but it is going onto a layer of water. So I want it just to kind of bleed out wherever it wants so that it gets lighter and lighter as you get towards the edge of the pages. So I'm going to just drop that color in right along the edges of the images, and that will kind of form like a seal so that the water will not seep in around the edges of the image there. So this is a way, if you don't want to use masking fluid, you can just use this technique of keeping your main images dry when you lay in your color. Now I'm just going to get the last bit of the background, and then I am going to add a little bit more color. And again, I'm only applying that color like right around the images, and I'm just going to let it bleed and move wherever it wants with this wet on wet technique. And then we're going to do the same thing for the bottom of the card. So this is going to be the table that the cheeses are sitting on. So I laid down some water, and then I'm laying down some sepia color, again, right beneath the images. And then I'm also applying a little bit of clear water here just to give the color a little bit more room to move. And I really want it to have like raggedy edges kind of bleeding out into nothingness. And then with those deckled edges that we have from the deckled edges die, it's just going to look really, really pretty. So we're going to have a background that's kind of with an irregular border, and then the card panel itself has an irregular border. It's just going to look real pretty. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to coloring in the parts of the scene that are not near anything that's wet. So this little tag here I can work on because it's not touching any of the areas I laid color down. I can also do these berries here. Now the color for the tag, I think that is just sap green. And then the color for the berries, this is some Pyrrole Scarlet. And I'm being sure to leave some white space in all of the berries just so that it looks like there's a little bit of a shine or maybe a dimple in the berry. And then I'm just laying down that candy cane red there, being careful not to touch against the area that is wet. And then I'm just going to add some berries on this side. And again, I'm being careful not to touch any wet areas here. Okay. Now we're going to work on this little part of the cheese, and part of my sleeves. I got this really fluffy faux fur blanket, and it just shed all over my shirt that I'm wearing in this video. So I'm gonna need to figure out what I want to do with that blanket. It's really, really cozy, but it does shed all over everything. Anyway, okay, so back to the cheese. So for the color, the cheese in the center is nickel azo yellow with a little bit of burnt sienna for that ridge that's along the top there. This is buff titanium, and I'm just going to apply it in just some areas here on the cheese. I'm leaving some white space because I want it to look like there's different light reflections on that cheese. I'm getting my sap green out again, and I'm just going to color in the foliage here around the coffee mug and then around the berries here. And I'm leaving some white space in each leaf as well, just so that it looks like there's some little light reflections and a little bit of sparkle to the scene. That's an effect that you get if you leave little spots of white in your little watercolor images. Okay, I got a little bit of bleeding there, so I'll just quickly dab that up with my paper towel. And then we'll work on this little piece of greenery here using that sap green. You could also make that piece of pine cone, so you could use some brown colors if you wanted to. And now I'm going to use some dark green. I think this is perylene green here. Undersea green would also be a nice color, or cascade green. But I think I'm using that perylene green, which is a really, really dark, like hunter green. These are all Daniel Smith watercolors that I'm using. And now we're going to put a little red wrapper around our cheese here. So I am using some perylene maroon for that. And then for the mug, we're going to color it in with Moon Glow. So it's a real pretty purplish gray color. So I'm just, again, focusing my color along the edges of the mug. And then I'm just going to dip my brush in some water and then just pull the color out from the edges. And then I'm going to apply a little more color to the edges, dip my brush in the clear water and pull it out once more. And now we can move on to coloring in this little cheese. I'm using the Moon Glow here for the wrapper on that cheese on the bottom. I'm going to use the Moon Glow again, just for the shadow underneath that cheese on the top of it. And then just pull the color out. And whenever it gets too dark, I just, again, pick it up with a dry brush. And now we're going to make this look like it's some Humboldt Fog goat cheese. I don't know if you've ever had that, but that's the cheese that I guess it's made with ash. So it has like this little rim of like brownish gray around the edges. So I just added that to the little top piece of cheese there. And then for our first cheese here, I'm just adding some green tones there, then decided I didn't like it that much, so I pulled it up. We're just going to add a little bit of shading to the top cheese with some of that buff titanium. Again, going in with another coat of buff titanium, being careful to leave in lots of white space. And now we can add the shadows underneath our cheese. I'm using neutral tint here. It's like a dark gray, almost like a purplish black. And I'm concentrating the color around the edge of the cheese and then around the edge of the paper where it folds up there. I'm going to leave that little triangle of the paper clear white just so that there's a little bit of contrast and pop to the scene. Looks like maybe there's some light reflecting off of it. And then I'm going to pull out my dark color with some clear water, just letting the shadow bleed out. We'll add some contrast onto the candy canes here with just a thicker coat of that perylene maroon just around the edges, leaving some of the first layer showing as well as some of the white so that you get different variations of color. Going to do the same with the little wrapper on the cheese there. For the coffee, I'm just using sepia, and I'm just adding a dark line and then letting it bleed into the center. We're going to add a second coat to the coffee mug here with the Moon Glow. So I'm just taking my concentrated color, pulling it along the edges of the mug, and then letting it bleed out or pulling out the color with some clear water. And we have a little shadow on the bottom of the mug, so I add a little bit of concentrated color down there, like right by the berries. And then add one more layer just until I get just the just the look I'm looking for. And then pulling the color out in the center because I want it to be fairly light to make it look like there is some light reflecting there. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of moon glow around the rim of the mug, making sure that there is a nice white ring around the top of the mug so that you can tell that it's the rim of the coffee. And then just adding the tiniest bit of shading onto the paper down there. And a little bit more shadow under this cheese. And now I think we're almost good. I'm just going to darken up the shadows underneath the images on the bottom there, just with a layer of neutral tint, and then I'll just pull it out with some clear water. And you can see right away that sort of makes the scene pop because of that contrast between the dark and the light. And just a couple more shadows here. Just add a little bit more contrast to the scene in areas where I think it looks flat. So around that little cheese on the corner, I'm adding some darkness. Add a little shadow around this cheese as well, just so you can see more of its shape. Then we'll add the red ribbon onto our cheese on the front. So I'm just following the stamped lines here and just adding red over it and adding a little bow, just tracing over the stamped image itself. So now we have our little cheese that's all nice and wrapped. Add a little bit more color to the tag here, or I guess to the mug. Going to deepen up that shadow just so it pops. And now just a little bit of color to the edge of this tag so it looks a little bit 3D. So I kind of put some concentrated color in an L shape there. And then I connected the tag to the ribbon with just a thin stripe of neutral gray. Now we can peel off our tape because we are done with the watercoloring. We can add our sentiment. So this is what it looks like. I just love how that color in the background just bleeds out to nothing in some areas. In some parts we have a little bit of a line where the watercolor just stops. Sometimes it just kind of fades out to nothing. I love that. I'm using a pebble colored card base. This is Hero Arts cardstock. I think that the pebble looks really nice with the color of the arches. Cold pressed paper, and it looks really nice with the indigo here in the back of the scene. So that is it. So that is our watercolored still life Christmas card using this adorable holiday cheese stamp set from Waffle Flower Crafts. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I really hope that you give this card a try. I hope everyone is having a great weekend and making lots of progress with your holiday cards. Have a great day, and I'll see you again soon in the next video.